Good morning, and welcome to the Sunday morning service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of San Miguel de Allende. I'm the Reverend Tom Rosiello, the minister of this wonderful fellowship, and it's a pleasure to welcome you. This is a very special time for us here in Mexico. In our service today, we join the greater community in celebrating the Day of the Dead. We do so both with traditional Mexican flair as well as other non-Mexican music and tradition, which also celebrates the lives of those who've gone before us. So that we can focus exclusively on this theme today, some of our usual parts of the service will not take place this week, but we'll be back next Sunday. Before we continue with our observance of this holiday, we'll go to Gary for a few announcements.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Gary Belkin. As a member of the Sunday Service Committee, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the Sunday morning service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of San Miguel de Allende. Our fellowship continues to grow during this pandemic. People now regularly join our Sunday morning Zoom services from Canada, the United States, and other places in Mexico. Here in our UU fellowship, you can bring your whole self, your full identity, and your questioning mind. Regardless of your religious tradition or lack of one, your race, your culture, your gender identity, or your sexual orientation, you are all welcome here with an open heart. We invite you to look in today's order of service for announcements of activities and membership information. The same information appears in our weekly newsletter, along with interesting articles about our busy fellowship. If you are not already on our mailing list, please send a note to Denise at the address in the chat box and we'll add you to the list. I would like to call your attention to a change in the time for our Monday mixer tomorrow. Because some people will be joining a phone bank to call Florida voters between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. San Miguel time, that's Central Time tomorrow, our mixer will begin at 5 p.m., 1 hour earlier than scheduled, in order to provide a support system for those making calls. At 7 p.m., we will continue to socialize for another hour. You can find information about signing up for tomorrow's phone bank in the order of service. As we all know, Florida is considered a key state in Tuesday's election. Our Zoom breakout discussions after the service are great places to reflect on this service with old and new friends. Just stay connected after the music ends and you'll be randomly assigned to a room. If only one or two people show up in your room, please sit tight for a minute or two and you will be moved to a larger group. At the end of the service, we'll post a question to kick off your discussion. And now, a few thoughts from the COVID-19 Task Force, a group of healthcare professionals and care team members with expertise we hope will be helpful during this pandemic. Very unfortunately, the news this week about this pandemic is not good, no matter where you are this morning. As economies open up, cases will increase. It's inevitable. We urge you to maintain, or better yet, to strengthen your level of caution. The urge to socialize is strong, but please remember, outdoors, distance at least 6 feet, keep your mask on, and wash your hands. Restaurants? Not as safe as eating at home. Visitors or workers in your home? Risky. Be extra careful, keep masks on, and ventilate. Keep those windows open. Please, let's all keep working hard to keep each other safe. Thank you. And now we go back to Tom.
Today we light our chalice in honor of the lives of those members of this fellowship, those members of our families, and all those who've gone before us. The light of their lives continues to shine, though it be from a distant shore. The preciousness of their lives still casts about us its radiance. In memory, we carry a spark of their flame in our hearts. We now go to Dan and then Diego to lead us in our covenant, both in English and in Spanish.
Good morning. Please join with me in reciting our spoken covenant, which should appear on your screen. We respect the interdependent web of life and work for a just and peaceful world. We encourage the search for truth and meaning, strive for compassion in our relationships, and seek values that will benefit our lives and the lives of others. This is our covenant.
Respetamos todos los estilos de vida dentro de su red interdependiente y trabajamos por un mundo justo y pacífico. Alentamos la búsqueda de la verdad y la comprensión total. Nos esforzamos por mantener compasión en nuestras relaciones y buscamos valores que beneficien nuestras vidas y las vidas de los demás. Este es nuestro convenio.
As most of you know, it's the custom here in San Miguel and throughout Mexico and other parts of Latin America as well to create beautiful altars of remembrance, ofrendas, perhaps like the one that's behind me, and usually they're in people's homes as well as throughout the community. In past years, when we were able to meet in person, we would invite people to bring photos or mementos of deceased loved ones to help us physically create a Day of the Dead altar. Thanks to many of you who contributed photos, and especially thanks to Joseph Plummer, we are able to continue this wonderful tradition in a virtual way. With a spirit of reverence and love for those who've gone before us, I now invite you to view our virtual Day of the Dead altar. I'm sure that many of you are thinking of others that you would wish to publicly remember on this day. I would invite you to do so now by typing their names in the chat column. We'll pause in silence to allow you to do so and to continue our reflection upon those who are no longer physically with us, but who today especially are with us in spirit. They once celebrated with us, we remember them. Each day, in the rising of the sun and its setting, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of support, we remember them. When we accomplish something of which we know they would be proud, we remember them. When we're lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys we just yearn to share, we remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live, because we remember them. Here in Mexico, some of the traditions associated with the Day of the Dead date back to Aztec times. One is the legend of La Llorona or La Llorona, the wailing woman, who is said to roam the earth looking for her drowned children. This legend is reenacted each year, especially in Mexico City, with a woman veiled in white, roaming the night in search of the deceased ones she loved. Now this year, the reenactment has taken on new meaning. La Llorona's plight has been seen to represent the plight of those who lost loved ones to COVID, those loved ones who died alone in a hospital away from their families. So this morning, we especially remember all those lost to COVID around the world, so many of whom spent their final days without the support of family or friends. And with this performance, we remember them and their families with a traditional Day of the Dead song. La Llorona is performed for us by Morganna Love and Mauro Ledesma.
It's my privilege to introduce our offering today. I serve as your chair of the Sunday Service Committee. This UU Fellowship cares about our surrounding Mexican community and currently supports 11 carefully vetted nonprofits which provide critical support for our neighbors. Our fellowship was instrumental in the creation of one organization, Caminamos Juntos, which is dedicated to helping Mexican nationals deported from the U.S. integrate into the SMA community. During the pandemic, Caminamos has been helping 80 participants with food and rent stipends for those who have lost their jobs. Thanks to our UU grant, they will be able to continue providing food goods until the end of the year. The current isolation and quarantine for parents and children is particularly challenging for deported families who are already struggling with being forced to live in a new culture. Their kids program is focusing now on building community to reduce isolation and build belonging. Families were recently treated to an agua miel workshop, a meal, and lots of games and social time. The wives and mothers talked about their children and offered support and help. But they noticed that the men, who normally are stoic and reluctant to talk about their deportation experiences, the men began sharing stories and giving each other advice. There were teens there who have been completely isolated since leaving the U.S. But at this outing, they did what teenagers do. They went off together and began building a community of their own. If you value supporting local nonprofits in our community, and if you enjoy our virtual Sunday services and other virtual gatherings during the week, please understand that pledges alone do not cover our expenses and already promised nonprofit grants. Your support is needed now more than ever. During the upcoming 90-second pause or immediately after the service, please go to our donate link, which you can find right now in the chat box, or go anytime to our website, UUFSMA.org. There you'll find convenient details and very easy to click links. If you prefer to donate locally in SMA by check or cash, just contact our president, Dan Neuspiel, with a private chat in the chat box or by email for ways to do that. I set up a no-brainer monthly transfer from my U.S. bank to the Fellowships Bank in Texas, so I don't have to keep signing on to make an additional donation. Most importantly, please give all you can so that we can continue our support for local organizations like Caminamos Juntos. Your donations can literally save lives. Our service will resume in about 90 seconds with music by Sweet Honey in the Rock. We thank you very sincerely for your generosity.
Dum 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 dum. I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. You used to rock me in the cradle of your arms. You said you'd hold me till the pains of life were gone. You said you'd comfort me in times like these, and now I need you. Now I need you. And you are I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. Since you've gone and left me, there's been so little beauty, but I know I saw it clearly through your eyes. Now the world outside is such a cold and bitter place. Here inside I have few things that will console. And when I try to hear your voice above the storms of life, then I remember all the things that I was told. I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. I think on the things that make me feel so wonderful when I was young. I think on the things that made me laugh, made me dance, made me sing. I think on the things that made me grow into a being full of pride. I think on these things, for they are true. I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. I thought that you were gone, but now I know you're with me. You are the voice that whispers all I need to hear. I know a breeze, a thank you, and a smile will take me far. I know that I am you and you are me and we are one. I know that who I am is numbered in each grain of sand. I know that I've been blessed again and over again. I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes. I am sitting here wanting memories to teach me to see the beauty in the world through my own eyes.
This week, many people around the world pause to remember the dead. Of course, as the words we shared during the Litany of Remembrance this morning remind us, we remember those who've gone before us in all seasons of the year and at many different times in our lives. But this day is a special day to remember them. It's a day observed in many different ways and in different religious traditions from Christian to pagan. Other world religions have similar holidays, perhaps at different times of the year. These traditions may all teach different things about death and immortality, but all seem to agree that there is a value for those of us who live on to take time to remember those individuals who have touched our lives with theirs but are no longer with us. You know, the word remembering itself is a kind of interesting word. If you go back to the Latin root, it simply means to be mindful of or to bring to mind again. But I think of the word in even a stronger and more physical way. As we see in the dancing Calacas and the beautifully dressed Catrinas, it seems to me that this might be a very Mexican way of thinking about that word, remembering. Here on this day, when we remember the dead, we sort of put them back together again. We put breath back in their lungs and smiles back on their faces. In a sense, we bring them back to life and we renew our relationship to them. This week's celebration is not about simply recalling someone from the distant past, but rather it's about engaging with them now. We celebrate a present relationship and not a closed chapter from the past. On this day, and on every day when we remember them, they live on. Of course, here in San Miguel, and in most of Mexico and Latin America, the Day of the Dead, El Día de los Muertos, or de Muertos, is a very special holiday. We see marigolds appearing everywhere, as well as colorful papel picado hanging across the streets, and images of skeletons dressed up in holiday finery, playing instruments and dancing everywhere. Perhaps less so this year because of COVID, but ordinarily there are great parades and fiestas. Families will go to the cemetery, but not for just a few minutes of quiet and respectful prayer at the grave of a loved one. No, they might go for the whole day and bring a wonderful picnic feast and musical instruments. And they have a party at the grave with the deceased loved one. It's not a day of sadness, but a day of happiness and renewed relationships. For them, the dead live on, not in some distant place of their Catholic theology, but on this day especially, they're right here in town with their families. And they don't just engage with the deceased in the cemetery. Homes have beautiful altars of remembrance, just as we've created virtually this morning. Perhaps like Malcolm and me, you've created an altar of remembrance with photos and mementos of deceased loved ones surrounded by candles and flowers, especially marigolds, and other traditional symbols of this day in your home too. In a Mexican home, these beautiful altars or ofrendas are created in a prominent place in the house. And some families will even strew marigold petals on the sidewalk in the street leading to the house, reminding the dead soul the way home. The families will gather and often make the deceased's favorite meal for him or her. The dead will take part in the conversation and the festivities of the day. It's a happy day when everyone is together again. Now, I don't want to suggest that Mexicans do not mourn their dead. Of course, they experience the loss of a loved one just as any of us do. They do their share of weeping and mourning, but somehow they seem to come to a place where they don't so much think of them as dead, but just as gone before, and even as still with them. Today, our dead rise up to be with us right here in this service because we brought them here in our hearts. You know, over the years, I've become fascinated with how Mexicans view death and their relationship to the dead. You know, death is always right in front of you in Mexico. The casket builder has a shop on the main street with showroom windows that display their work. Death is not hidden. It is not unmentioned. It is part of life. As you know, if you've been walking around town this week, depictions of skeletons are everywhere. Walk into any shop and there's skeletons for sale. And they're not like our US Halloween skeletons. They're well dressed and depicted doing all the things one does in life. Maybe cooking, being a barber, dancing, playing musical instruments. These calacas or skeletons are not intended to be scary, but rather they suggest that even in death, we continue to be who we are and not some anonymous, undefined soul. In Mexico, la vida y la muerte flow together. Speaking about the Day of the Dead, Margaret Atwood wrote, "In Mexico, they do this festival the right way. Bright candy skulls, family picnics on the grave, a plate set out for each individual guest, and a candle for the soul. Everyone goes away happy, including the dead. But we have rejected this easy flow between dimensions. We want our dead unmentionable. We refuse to feed them. Our dead, as a result, are thinner, grayer, harder to hear, and hungrier." I'm sure that among us here, there are many different views as to whether or not everything ends with the death of our bodies, or if our spirit or some energy continues to exist in some way. But theological beliefs about life after death are really not what I want to focus on today. However, I do want to talk about our immortality and that of those whom we love in a different sense. There's no doubt that we will live on in the hearts and in the lives of those whom we've loved and whom loved us. The chain can even go to successive generations when we share our memories and pass on what we were given by our departed friends and family to the generation after us. The dead only die if they die in our hearts. So today I invite you to be in relationship with those who live on with you. Let me preface this discussion by saying I know there are some among us who have painful memories of a parent or a grandparent. Not all memories are good ones. And sometimes we have to work hard to move beyond the painful memories. But at other times, even engagement with the painful memories can be productive for us. You know, I remember a woman in my congregation back in Massachusetts who said that she had been challenged by her relationship with her mother and had worked for years to make sense out of the pain that she suffered from the way she was treated as a child. She said she now felt such a weight lifted because she finally had reconciled with her mother. When asked how her mother felt about this, she said, "I have no idea. She died 20 years ago." Our relationships with those from the past actually continue to evolve after they're long gone. Not a day goes by in my life when those who were closest to me don't rise up. I've come to realize that those who've gone before still have a great deal to say to me, and I guess I to them. Some of you have heard me mention Uncle T before. He lived with Malcolm and me for many years, and his photo taken at the great organ at the Christian Science Mother Church in Boston, where he was the organist, was in our virtual altar this morning. He was a very famous organist and even more famous concert pianist, particularly noted for his performance of Mozart. A couple years ago, I was just casually listening to a local NPR station, and they were playing a recording of the Mozart Piano Concerto in C major, K330 for you piano enthusiasts. This was Uncle T's piece. He won the Naumburg Award in 1940 playing it, and it launched his career. I was drawn into that performance on the radio because the little nuances of interpretation were exactly what Uncle T would do. I could see him doing it, and I couldn't wait to hear who the performer was. Now, I thought for sure it must be one of his many piano students that studied with him. But it actually turned out that it was an old recording of Uncle T himself performing. As part of my Day of the Dead observance, I listened to that same recording of him playing that piece yesterday. And when I hear that recording, Uncle T just comes back to me. Moreover, in the past couple of years, my partner Malcolm, who many of you know is also a concert pianist, has been performing that same piece. And each time he does, Uncle T rises up in me, and I'm sure rises up for him as well. But you know, there was so much more about Uncle T than just his musical performance that's still speaking to me. I constantly find myself seeing life through the lens that he provided. It's a lens of love and right relationship, of seeing the humor in a situation and being grateful for every blessing. He had lots of witty and some pretty silly sayings about life. And you know, rarely does a day go by when I don't catch myself saying, as Uncle T would say, and each time Uncle T lives on. My maternal grandmother is another person who rises up with great regularity in my life. She'd been a school teacher who in her senior years had me as her only devoted pupil. She sparked curiosity in all things, showed me beauty in art, in nature, in music. She introduced me to the piano, to liberal religion, and to canasta. With her, there was something to learn in every moment. But there was more that she taught by the way she lived her life. She had a practice of always seeing the good in another person. And she never spoke badly of anyone. And when challenged by someone's ugly behavior, her reaction would always be to look beyond it and find something good to say about him or her. Now, sometimes that would frustrate me as a child. But when I became a lawyer working in the criminal courts, either as a prosecutor or representing people who had done some pretty bad things, the memories of my grandmother visited me often. And to my surprise, they always seemed to cause me to find some bit of good, even in the worst hardened criminal. For my second birthday, my grandmother hooked a Peter Rabbit rug for my bedroom. I was too young to actually remember receiving it at 2, but I remember it being in my room all the years of my childhood. And when I got to those teenage years, I put it away in mothballs for a while, thinking that I had outgrown it. But today, that rug hangs framed in a frame that my dad made in the living room of our lake cottage. And each time I walk into that room, she rises up. The rug constantly reminds me of all the lessons I learned from the children's stories she read to me. That rug took months to make. I think each time she hooked a piece of wool and pulled it through that burlap backing, she was thinking of me. Well, as a somewhat humorous aside, I have to tell you that she was really very dedicated to this craft of making hooked rugs and very proud of her work. And she was also a very proper English speaking woman, never using slang or even probably familiar with it. One time in a discussion at a large gathering of folks, someone making polite conversation asked folks what their hobby was, and she proudly announced to all those that were gathered there that she was a hooker. The fun memories are good to visit as well. You know, sometimes even folks that were generations earlier, that we did not know, that we never met, can rise up in us. I never met my great-grandfather, who was a Methodist minister. But on my path to ministry, I discovered him in the margin notes and the papers inserted into his old Bible that had been given to me, and even in the preaching coat that I discovered in an old trunk in an attic. Somehow, as the next minister to come along in my family, I felt that he rises up in me again. I'm sure you have stories just like these, of the folks who regularly rise up for you. As I think about my grandmother and Uncle T, I realize that they were not just leading their lives in ways that intersected with mine, but there was something conscious about creating those memories. And I'm so glad that there was. I've begun to think about that in relationship to the younger members of our family. It's not just about the interactions we have with them now. It's about what we give to them that will live beyond us and maybe help to sustain them in some way after we're gone. I hope we're all around for a long time to come. But you know, this day is also a good time not just to remember those whom we hold in our hearts fondly, but also to think about how we might be remembered on some day of the dead way in the future. It's not a morbid thought, and I think it might even serve to improve the quality of our relationships right now. When we are gone, our lives will still be speaking. If we are parents or grandparents who spend valuable time with children or grandchildren, we will rise again in them. If we are teachers, we will rise again in our students. If we are musicians, we'll rise again in our music. Artists and crafters will rise again in their creations. A scientist in his discoveries, a counselor in the good advice given, a cook in the recipes he or she passes on. Even generation later, we rise again when someone carries on a tradition, or benefits from a legacy that we have left, or discovers us in their genealogy, or meets us in some item in an old attic trunk. You know, we may live on elsewhere in worlds beyond our knowing, but for sure, we will live on here in the lives we touched, just as those who've gone before us live on in our lives today. Just as those we love rise up for us today, we will rise again and again. As sure as the sun rises, as sure as the sea, as sure as the winds and the trees, we rise again in the faces of our children. We rise again in the voices of our song. We rise again and again in the good deeds of our hearts and hands and minds that touch the lives of those whom we love.
When the waves roll on over the waters and the ocean cries, we look to our sons and daughters to sustain our lives, as if a child could tell us why. That as sure as the sunrise, as sure as the sea, as sure as the wind in the trees, we rise again in the faces of our children. We rise again in the voices of our song. We rise again in the waves out on the ocean. And then we rise again. When the light goes dark with the forces of creation across the stormy sky, we look to reincarnation to explain our lives, as if a child could tell us why. That as sure as the sunrise, as sure as the sea, as sure as the wind in the trees, we rise again in the faces of our children. We rise again in the voices of our song. We rise again in the waves out on the ocean. And then we rise again. We rise again in the faces of our children. We rise again in the voices of our song. We rise again in the waves out on the ocean. And then we rise again. And then we rise again.
I have to take a moment, not sure you saw that at the end, but it's still sitting with me, and that is that beautiful anthem by Canadian composer Leon Dubinsky was sung by all female Toronto area physicians and dedicated to their COVID patients. You know, I like to think that when we're gone, we'll say, just as those who've gone before us are saying to us now, these words from Mary Fry. Do not stand by my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I'm 1,000 winds that blow. I'm the diamond glint on snow. I'm the sunlight on ripened grain. I'm the gentle autumn's rain. When you awake in the morning hush, I'm the swift uplifting rush of quiet birds in circling flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not stand by my grave and cry, I am not there. I do not die. Thank you for being with us this morning. You know, with the US elections next Tuesday, these next few days, this next week is going to be a stressful and anxious time for many of us. Our emotions will likely be in high gear. Please care for yourself spiritually. Take time to breathe. Remember who you are. Remember your community, those who are there for you. And also try and find compassion for those who think differently from you. Use the best of yourself to meet whatever joy, sorrow, or concern may come your way. And please join us next week to share with your community in a service of healing and hope. We'll now extinguish our chalice with these words of benediction from Frederick Buechner. When you remember me, it means that you have carried something of who I am with you, that I left some mark of who I am on who you are. It means you can summon me back to your mind, even though countless years and miles may stand between us. It means that after I die, you can still see my face and hear my voice and speak to me in your heart. Remember me.
Hasta que mis brazos